Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Bordertown Strange. I'm Pam, and this is my co host, Jess. And we're excited tonight. We have with us our friend, author Pat Fitzhugh. And he's going to be audio with us tonight, but he is here. So feel free to ask questions, and we will pop them up, and I'm sure he'll be happy to answer them. Pat's written a few books. He's most well known for his work with the Bell Witch, but he has some other stuff too. So we're really excited to dig into some of that as well. But before we get started, Jess, do you want to do a little bit of housekeeping, and then we'll do what the weird word?
Yes. So as always, a huge thank you to all of our followers and subscribers, and to anyone new who's come in the last week. We so appreciate you. If you're watching on Facebook, just take a minute to like and share. And if you're hanging out on YouTube, take a quick second to hit the thumbs up and ring that bell if you haven't already, so you'll know when we're coming live and bringing you new content. We're also available wherever you listen to your podcasts. So check us out on Spreaker and Apple and all of them that you can think of. We should be there. And if we're not, please let us know so we can rectify that situation. Also, we would love to get your stories and your topic ideas that you would like for the show. Although we have 1,001, we would still like to know what you would like to hear. We have a little list building right now of some viewer options that they've asked for. I do want to say we plan on here a number of weeks out doing an entire show on the app Randonautica. And what we would like for you at home to do, if you get some time, download Randonautica onto your phone, and I'll make sure to throw a link to it up on our Facebook page. Take a little time and play the game and see what you come up with, and let us know your stories, because some amazing things have happened with this app, and some crazy things have happened with this app, and some scary things have happened with this app, and we would love to get like a wide range of stories happening. So like I said, I'll put a link to that on our Facebook page, and maybe if I can figure it out, get a link down into the chats.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
can do that.
Yeah. All
Absolutely.
right. Do you have anything else, Pam, before we
No, I
move
think
on?
that's it. Definitely. I'm
Okay.
glad you threw Randonautica in there, though.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on to word of the week. What the weird word of the week, I should say.
What a weird word. All righty.
Yeah.
Get it up here on the screen. There we go.
Yeah, so this week, since we're gonna have Pat here, and he is really big on Bell Witch. If any of you at home know anything about Bell Witch, poltergeist is the word for this situation. Holy cow. As you're going to find out, because we're going to talk a little bit about Bell Witch. And uh, we did promise Pat we would talk about more than just Bell Witch, so we will touch on it a little bit. So, poltergeist, originates from the German words poltern, meaning to make noise, and geist, of course, meaning ghost or spirit. So, the literal meaning of poltergeist is noisy ghost. Poltergeist is a type of ghost or supernatural entity known for causing physical disturbances, such as loud noises and objects being moved or thrown around. Unlike other ghosts that might appear visually, poltergeists are more often associated with auditory and physical manifestations. And Bell Witch is extraordinarily auditory.
It is.
Um, yeah, I was kind of looking at clairaudience, but it doesn't really apply here because anyone who was within the vicinity, even those outside of the cabin, heard the witch. So it's not, clairaudience is more of a specified one person only hearing it in a medium type situation. So I didn't think
Mhm.
it really applied.
True. True, true. All
Yeah.
righty. So, Pat, we haven't heard from you yet. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, hello, hello. How are y'all doing this evening?
We are
We're
very
great. We're
well,
super
sir.
glad you're here, too.
Oh,
Yeah.
seems like I've seen you before somewhere, huh? Okay, I will tell the audience a little bit about myself, and I guess that's good because there's not a whole lot to say other than I'm just an old boy from Tennessee who 47 years ago decided to do some research on the Bell Witch legend and hopefully finish it up as a summer project. And here we are now, and the research is still going. Still a lot more paranormal than just the Bell Witch, but the Bell Witch case has always been a pet project, if you will. It's a paranormal story. It's a whodunit mystery, and last but not least, all these people and places involved in the story were actually real, which is unlike a lot of stories where you hear about these different characters or people that have died mysteriously, and then you try to look them up and you find out there's nothing on them. So the Bell Witch case has that sense of validity, at least to an extent. Being that the people and places were real. So my research is centered on getting to the bottom of what happened to bring the Bell Witch story into existence.
Pat, can I stop you for just a second? We're having a really hard time with your audio. Not sure what exactly is happening.
Me neither. Let me take a look at something right here.
Okay, now you're clear again. So I'm not sure what was.
How about now?
Yeah, you're great.
Yeah, you sound.
Oh, I don't know what to say about that. Okay. Well, how much did you get of what I said?
Not a lot.
Just sparse pieces. It was becoming very garbled and watery sounding underneath. So
Yeah.
our apologies.
Wow, I'm not sure what that is, but just let me know if it happens again.
Okay, if
Okay.
it does, well, I'll just kind of put my fingers up so you can see them.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so back to me and what I do. I travel around the country lecturing about, celebrating, and promoting America's greatest ghost story, that being the legend of the Bell Witch of Tennessee. I began researching the legend 47 years ago as a summer project, and needless to say, it's more than just a summer project, it's still going on. And as a researcher, my goal is to get to the bottom of what brought the Bell Witch story into being. And there's a lot of different scenarios, a lot of things that have to be looked at regarding people and history. So it's a very, very busy thing. We're always finding new things. Also, I wear another hat, and the other hat is that of a storyteller, where I tell the stories and entertain people telling the stories. So you can look at it like this. With my lectures and events, I will go and tell the Bell Witch story. I never tell it the same way two times. It's always different because there's so much to draw from, all the different little stories and facets of it. And then as a researcher, I go back and say, well, this is true, this is not true, this may be true, this person was actually related to so and so, and they might have been in cahoots with something. So, I wear both hats, and I try in my events, like lecture events, to focus on the storytelling and the entertainment aspect first and foremost, because that's what 99% of the people come for. But then I also inject my research and let them know I'm also a serious researcher. So I just try to mix the two in and keep the right balance there. I do a lot of other things, research a lot of other cases, do a lot of things aside from that and the paranormal. But the Bell Witch has been a pet project. I've done some books on it. I've been on quite a few different TV shows, a couple of movies. So, I guess I'm best known for that part of the paranormal. And here we are tonight.
We promise we won't talk about it the entire time for sure. Let me jump in real quick. We've got some people in the chat. We've got Ian in there saying hi. Ian's over
Hi,
in
Ian.
the UK. And we've got Sin saying hi to Pat. Hi, Sin. Thanks for being here. And then Mike Coy. Mike's actually one of our team members. So it's good to see you, Mike.
Yeah.
Okay, well, hello, everyone.
Oh, high praise. Apparently, we're hitting the big time now because we've got Pat on. I agree. Yeah, Pam and I actually traveled like 7.5 hours across the state of Missouri out of Kansas and into Kentucky just to go
Yep.
see Pat talk about the Bell Witch. And of
Yeah,
course, a fun road trip, also,
Yeah, can't beat a
That was
road
kind
trip.
of, you can't beat
yeah,
a road trip.
that's I had a lot of people ask me over the years, why do you keep doing it? And I mean, there's the obvious answer. I'm not 100% sure what started the Bell Witch legend, even though I'm about at the 98% point, but also all of the wonderful and fabulous people that I meet along the way, as well as a few interesting folks as well. But we won't get into that part. So, when there's people like you all who travel that many miles and show up in Kentucky just a few minutes after a tornado watch was lifted,
That's
and
true.
it was actually downgraded into a severe thunderstorm, and you all showed up, and miraculously 20 people actually made their way there, which I didn't think that would happen because of
Yeah.
the tornadoes. So, you all going all that far just to hear me rattle my trap about the Bell Witch, that means a lot. And it happens, every few events, I'll run into people who have traveled hundreds of miles just to hear the lecture, or just to shake hands and bump fists or have a good old hug or something. And, that's one of the big reasons I keep doing it. People, or a lot of people, seem to like what I do and how I do it and the style in which I use to do it. So, they will, some of them are return visitors. They'll, come over and over, and
Mhm.
sometimes to a lot of different events, and it requires them to come hundreds of miles. I'll relate one story. This happened a couple of years ago. I was doing an event called Haints and Heroes down in Water Valley, Mississippi. And if you're familiar with the Bell Witch legend of Mississippi, then you'll know how prominently Water Valley figures into it, and also being the final resting place of Betsy Bell. So I was down there and giving this lecture event. It was a very small room, very small, intimate setting, but a very, what could I put? Very, I'm no good with words. That's why I'm a writer. It was like, a lot of old antique furniture. It had kind of a Victorian look, but
Mm.
also kind of a very, what do you call it, spaced out look, I guess. Very cool place, but very small, intimate setting. And in attendance, we had descendants from the Bell family, the Fort family. Reverend Fort was the Bell's pastor at Red River Church. The Who was that? Also the Batts family, if you remember Kate
Mm.
Batts,
Yeah.
and also it was the Johnson family, descendant from them. James Johnson, the neighbor of John Bell, who he shared the haunting with at first. You know, four different family descendants of four of the most key families in the entire Bell Witch legend showed up that night. So that's always a surprise, and that makes me feel real good too. That people like that like to come to the events and everything. But yeah, it's
That,
great that y'all showed up in Kentucky. I know you told me something about you were thinking about doing it or something, and
yeah.
I thought, do what? Why in the hell? I mean, why in the heck? As much as we've talked about the Bell Witch, and as much as they've heard me lecture about it before, why? I mean, it's great if they do. I mean, that's wonderful. But yeah, it's still a road trip. There's
Oh,
it's
yeah, it's fun.
interesting weather, scenery, and all that at the time you were up there, though. But yeah, very
Yeah.
yeah, it was great. It was great. Enjoyed the dinner afterwards, and
Yeah.
all the things we talked about that we can't talk about on here. Uh,
And it
yeah,
was cool because they're we were in Paducah, and, if I remember correctly, some of, the Bats family showed up there too,
Yeah.
and that
at,
was pretty cool.
at Paducah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Let me think.
I can't remember
The
exactly what family
Yeah,
member it was, but it was some descendants for
you're
sure.
right.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, she was a lady. I think she came by herself. She was
Mm-hmm.
sitting in the kind of in the middle
Yep.
of the rows of chairs. Yeah, she was a descendant of Kate Batts.
That's so cool.
And yeah, that's great. And I'm so glad to see the Batts descendants start coming to these things and taking more of an interest in the legend. If you
Mhm.
look back at the legend, this lady named Kate Batts was blamed for the thing, even though she had nothing to do with it.
Yep.
And most of your historians, writers, especially movie and TV people, they all just throw it on her.
Yeah.
Perfect scapegoat. But
Exactly.
they have yet to give the Batts family their own voice in this, to have their say about it.
Mhm.
And back in 2015, we did a show called Cursed. It was a TV series in the fall on the A&E, and we were able to get descendants of the Bats family in on that, so they could give their
Cool.
perspective. But yeah, it's interesting all the people you meet with these different events, and it's
Yeah.
always it's always a good time, even when they get mad. So
She I know she appreciated the manner in which you present the information and the grace that you give Kate Batts, you know.
Yeah.
So I thought that was cool.
So before we continue on, I know that there's probably going to be listeners and people watching who don't know the Bell Witch story that well. And I'm not going to ask you to do your full spiel, although we would love that. But we would prefer that people pay to go and see your lectures on it because it's just so amazing to be one on one with you. But would you mind giving our listeners just a little quick like summary of the generalities of the haunting and what kind of happened so they can understand the Kate Bat situation?
okay, I'll go through a very short version here. I
Yeah.
think we have what, a couple hours.
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
might be
just
able to get the
us.
short version in a couple hours. We'll
Well,
try.
we don't need a
No.
ton of detail, but if you could just like give the
Mhm.
general overview of kind of like a little summary.
Sure, I'll be glad to. The story of the Bell Witch was centered on a family, that being the family of John Bell and his wife Lucy and their children in northern Middle Tennessee, and a series of very frightening events that befell them between the years of 1817 and 1821. These events began as just minor inconveniences, so to speak, things that nobody thought about being something from the other side, but just a few little weird things. Strange animals being seen, strange birds being seen, that sort of thing. Wildlife. But then as time went on, the family began experiencing more eerie things, lights at the edge of the woods across the field, like candles dancing, raps on the walls, the sounds of chains being dragged across the floor, a whole lot of demonstrations or events that are of a poltergeist type nature. Well, that was in 1817. As time went on, these events and the entity's characteristics went way beyond that of a poltergeist. The thing eventually got to where it could whisper. It proved that it possessed intelligence and ultimately became a very loud and discernible disembodied voice. Along the way, some of the family members, especially the youngest daughter, Betsy, was physically beaten by this thing. Some of the other kids were beaten on occasion. This thing, when people would come to try and experience it or to debunk it, which is pretty much all the time, this thing would put on a show for them. It could tell them about their past. It could tell them about their friends' pasts. Just do all kinds of remarkable things. Meanwhile, the poltergeist disturbances that were just beneath the surface of all this were still happening, and they continued throughout the course of the haunting. People always ask the question, who are you? What do you want? And one of the many answers that this entity gave was that it was the witch of Old Kate Batts, and it was here to torment John Bell out of his life and make him die a very slow, mysterious death. Well, there was a lady who lived up the road named Kate Batts. Her husband was an invalid. He had been hurt some way, I think some say in a logging accident. He was no longer able to run the farm, so she ran the farm and had her children help her. And the people in the neighborhood really did not look up to her very much. One, because she was doing what was perceived back then as a man's job, and the other because the family never did have much money, where by contrast, most of the other families in the Red River settlement were pretty well to do. In fact, the reason Mrs. Batts ran the farm herself and made her children do the work, they did not have the money to buy slaves. And this was a slave state back then.
Yeah.
But the other people there, most of them in the Red River settlement, uh, had slaves. There was one guy, one preacher there who had, I believe it was close to 100 slaves even. But Ms. Batts was not financially capable of hiring, buying any slaves or anything. So she was looked down by people in the community, and some people say she had somewhat of a loud mouth, or was just kind of strange and eccentric. So when word got out that the entity claimed to be Kate Batts, everybody started calling the entity Kate or Old Kate. It just seemed to fit, and the thing would answer to the name Kate. Meanwhile, the real Kate Batts was furious and spent most of her time going around the community trying to let everybody know she had nothing to do with this. So that's how the Bell Witch became known or called Old Kate as a nickname. Historical research has shown Mrs. Kate Batts had nothing to do with this. So after the Kate Batts revelation, people continued visiting the place, including some people who claimed to be witch tamers who would debunk this thing or cast a spell to eradicate it. Or in one case, a man who came with Major General Andrew Jackson said that he would just take out his pistol and shoot his silver witch killer bullet and kill the thing. Well, he didn't suffer a very good fate, and neither did any of the others who were skeptical or who was, trying to kill this thing. Uh, Very bad stuff there. So as time went on, the youngest daughter, Betsy, became engaged to a little boy named Joshua Gardner who lived not far away. And everybody in the neighborhood was really happy about that. Um, all this time, I don't know what all happened to Joshua as far as Bell Witch encounters, but I know all throughout this 4 year period, Betsy was being physically hit in the face and slapped and yelled at by this disembodied voice and these invisible hands of steel, if you will. The entity, we call her Old Kate, did not like the idea of Betsy marrying Joshua Gardner. She told him not to. Betsy said, "We're going to do it anyway." But then the entity brought up the fact once again that John Bell was a bad man and was going to kill Mr. Bell. And sure enough, not long after that, Mr. Bell began experiencing health problems, and his condition continued to deteriorate over the last year and a half. Finally, in December of 1820, one morning he was found in his bed in a coma, and then the next morning he died. And the entity known as Kate claimed to have poisoned him with some foul smelling dark liquid that was in a vial over on the cupboard, something that the doctor had not left for Mr. Bell. And legend has it that Kate sang until the very last mourner left the graveyard. And then shortly after that, things really died down in terms of disturbances. And then finally, by Easter 1821, everybody was having a picnic down by the Red River. And Betsy and Joshua Gardner were there having their little lunch and doing some fishing. And the voice of Kate began screaming in Betsy's ear, "Don't marry Joshua, don't marry Joshua." So at that point, Betsy just gave up, threw in the towel, and said, "I'm sorry, Joshua, but I must break off the engagement. We know what Kate did to my father. If you and I marry, there's no telling what she could do to you." So at that point, Betsy and Joshua broke up. And then a couple of months after that, Kate just suddenly disappeared, said she was going to be gone for 7 years. Then things went back to normal. Well, supposedly back to normal, but I would question what was normal after 4 years of all of that. Um, four
Right.
years later, Kate showed up again, this time in the home of John Bell Jr., one of the older sons. He was the second oldest son, and had a series of conversations with him about the past, the present, and the future, and about civilizations and cultures and religion. Then bade farewell again, promising to return to John Bell's most direct descendant in 107 years, which would have been 1935. Now, did Kate return in 1935? Some say she did, some say she didn't, but most people say she never left the place. I mean, even though we don't see or hear about disturbances as shocking as those that allegedly occurred in the 1800s with John Bell family, there are still many things that happen up there in the area and around the cave and everything which defy explanation. So a lot of people think that Kate never left the place to begin with. And that's the short version, very short version of the Bell Witch legend.
Yes,
It's a fascinating story. It
it
truly is.
is. Yes, we appreciate you kind of filling our listeners in on that because it's an extraordinarily well known one. But there are still people, of course, that have never heard of it, or they've probably heard the name but don't know the story behind it.
Hmm.
And I think it's an exceptional story because it, in and of itself, if you're just hearing the story for the first time, it sounds extraordinarily far fetched to have a ghost that is that audible to so many people. You automatically assume, well, that's a fairy tale someone's made up. But so many people in all different kind of ranks of life
Hmm.
heard and witnessed this phenomena so much, you can't help but think there has to be something to it. I mean, Andrew Jackson uh, hauled tail out of there. So,
Yeah, and that's where I'll tell you a little bit about Andrew Jackson. You know, of all the different Bell Witch stories out there, hundreds of them nowadays, and there's more of them every day. The Andrew Jackson encounter is by far the most popular and the most requested. So, if you don't mind, I'll tell that pretty quickly. Then I will
oh,
put
by all means,
Absolutely.
my
Yeah.
yeah.
researcher's spin on it. So, John Bell's older sons, two of them, his two oldest sons, and possibly the third, we're not sure on the third one he might have as well, fought under Andrew Jackson in the Battle of New Orleans. It was actually the War of 1812, and it was the battles of New Orleans and Horseshoe Bend. Somehow, some way, I guess lots of word of mouth, Jackson heard about what was going on up at the Bell Farm. And at the time, he lived in Nashville at a place called the Hermitage, which was actually a couple of miles up the street from where I used to live until I moved away a couple of weeks ago. But he heard about this and decided to bring some of his men up there to investigate. Now, whether he made the connection between the Bell Farm and the older Bell sons fighting under him, it's hard to say, but probably not, because he was a major general and they were just like privates or first rank soldiers. So it's doubtful that they knew and associated with him personally. But he went up to investigate, and the legend has it that as his entourage drew nearer and nearer to the Bell Farm, that the horses went slower and slower to the point where they could just barely move and pull the wagons until right at the Bell property line, they came to a complete stop. And the men tried to get the horses to go. They would hit at them, they would push at them. Andrew Jackson would curse the horses out. They still wouldn't move. Then it is said that there was a voice that started ringing out from up in the trees, saying, "It's okay, General, you can go on now. I'll see you again tonight." And then the horses miraculously just started trotting away, carrying the wagons, and they went on up the lane and set up camp at the Bell home outside. And that night, Jackson and his men, they joined the Bells for dinner, and they all did what people in Red River did. They ate, they prayed, they sang hymns, they prayed some more, they sang some more hymns, said a few more prayers, and eventually Jackson began telling the Bell family a lot of his old war stories, which were very entertaining. And at some point, one of Jackson's men, who I think might have been one of his main scouts by the name of John Gordon, uh, spoke up and said, "Well, there is no Bell's witch here, at least not tonight, because it knows I'm at here and it's afraid of me. I have my pistol and I have a silver witch killer bullet in it. And if this thing does anything, I will shoot it. And it knows I will. That's why we haven't heard anything from it tonight." Well, as soon as he said that, he got slapped in the back. He turned around to see who slapped him so he could hit him back, but there was nobody behind him. Then he got a swift kick right in his bottom, and legend has it, he was kicked so hard that he actually flew out the front door, and
That's awesome.
completely terrified. Then the voice of Kate spoke up and said, "General, this man is an old fool. He doesn't know anything about witches or about me or how to kill anything. He's a fake. He's a fraud. And General, you have one other man in your party who's also a fraud. I'll expose him tomorrow night." Okay, well, at that point, of course, I'm sure Jackson's men were saying, "Oh man, I'm getting sick. Maybe we need to go back to Nashville tonight, or my wife's about to have a baby. I need to go be with her." Every excuse possible to leave the Bell home. They didn't want to be exposed the next night, or possibly be exposed. Well, Jackson took the stance that if there was a fraud in his party, he wanted to know about it. So his men were going to stay right there, and they would find out the next night who was right.
You're getting a little underwater-ish sounding.
Okay, is this any better here?
That's much better.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the fact that I've been up since 5 a.m. and my voice is just slowly dying.
Mm.
I need to do more lecture events so I can get my voice back in shape. Uh, okay, so Jackson and his men went on out to their tents to sleep for the evening. It's doubtful they got much sleep, but something strange happened that night, and nobody really knows for sure what it was. But at daybreak the following morning, Jackson and his men were seen on horseback riding through Springfield, Tennessee, headed back to in the direction of Nashville. So we don't know what changed Jackson's mind. Now, as a researcher, I will tell you that Jackson did own property I think about between 2 and 4 miles away from the Bell farm. Jackson did not live there, but he owned the farm, and that's where they trained and raised racehorses. So Jackson did have occasion or reason to visit that area and perhaps pass right by the Bell home on his way to check on his horse farm. But I've not been able to find out anything from the Hermitage Historical Society, from the State Library and Archives, my own research through paper, anything at all about Jackson having an encounter with the Bell Witch,
Really?
or even
Huh.
visiting the Bell Farm, even though he certainly could have visited.
Yeah.
So, that's my researcher's spin on it. And
Huh.
also mention that the Andrew Jackson story, like many of the other Bell Witch stories that we know of today, first appeared in a fictional novel that came out in 1894. Just like Kate Batts, nobody ever heard of Kate Batts and in any of the earlier accounts, and there were plenty.
Mhm.
The 1894 book was not the first account of the Bell Witch. No mention of Kate Batts or Andrew Jackson in any of those early accounts, even the two that came from 1819, which was right during the peak of the haunting.
Yeah.
So I think Jackson might have gone by there, and I would love to believe he had an encounter with the Bell Witch. And it's a great story. I love to tell it, but I haven't seen any proof or anything that convinces me he really encountered the Bell Witch.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. A lot of that gets, I mean, it is so long ago. Things really do get embellished. Hi, Sylvain.
Hi, Sylvain.
Interesting,
Yeah,
interesting.
research always ends up turning up stuff you wish it wasn't true, and then stuff you're like, holy cow, I had no idea. So
That's true. The research carries me in a lot of different directions, and sometimes I'm happy and surprised. Other times I'm disappointed.
Yes.
yeah,
Just depending on what I come across.
yeah, it's like researchers regret. You wish you hadn't flipped that rock over.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've
Yeah.
done that a few times. There's a couple of stories. So in the Bell Witch book, the full account book, there was a couple of stories that I thought was really interesting, and not so much specific to the Bell Witch itself, but like music at the Enchanted Spring. I loved that. That was in like 1866. A couple of men near the Red River.
Right. And like I said earlier, a lot of people felt that the Bell Witch never left the place.
Hmm.
And also you have the concept of blame it on old Kate.
Yeah.
Anything that happens in that area, there will be people who blame it on old Kate. But yeah, there was reports of music being heard coming out or coming from the Enchanted Spring, which that's near the confluence of the Red River and Sturgeon Creek, which ran right smack through the Bell Witch area. And also, Enchanted Spring is right there, or reportedly right near the spot where Betsy Bell and Joshua Gardner would go and have their picnics and everything. So, very prominent location. But yeah, the most beautiful music in the world with no source. And of course, back in the 1860s, I mean, it's not like somebody could have been blaring a radio or
Exactly.
recording or anything like that. And also, there were reports. There were some mills down by the river, grain mills and things. And there were
Mhm.
reports of some of those grain mills where there were noises being heard in the middle of the night, even though there was nothing going on, and they were very strange. They were not the noises typically associated with mills. And one case where I think all the lights came on one night in there. Well, I won't say
Wow.
lights because that was way back in the olden days, but I'll say the mill lit up. And then there was also the case, another one, long after the Bell Witch had allegedly left. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, something changed on my end. I heard a
Uh
hissing sound and then it stopped. Maybe there's a Bell Witch whispering in my ear, huh?
oh. Maybe so.
Yeah. So this account, um, Dr. Henry Sugg, who had actually been the doctor of Lucy Bell, John Bell's wife, he was making some rounds and he went to a log cabin up on what they called Browns Ford Bluff to tend to a sick youngster at the home of Joel Egbert Bell. Can't pronounce Egbert. So I'll just say Joel Bell.
Sounds good.
So yeah, Joel was actually the youngest child of John and Lucy Bell. Now I hear that hissing sound again.
Huh. We don't hear it on our end.
Uh-oh.
That's
Yeah,
odd.
strange things are starting to happen here.
Mm.
As
Uh-oh.
long as I don't start screaming or cussing, I think it's safe to say the Bell Witch didn't get me. But the doctor was examining this child, and everything just flew out of his bag, went everywhere. His doctor's bag with instruments and stuff, medicines and stuff like just flying out everywhere. And that house also later on was one night. I don't think it was Joe. I think it might have been Richard Bell, one of the Bells, and Betsy Bell's sons. This was after Betsy Bell grew up and got married to her much older school teacher and all that, long after the Bell Witch disturbances. Betsy's son, his name was Leftrick Reynolds Powell, Civil War soldier. He was there at that same house along with one of the Bells, and they started having a bunch of strange activity, activity there. So there was always something going on there. It still is. Interestingly enough, that house was eventually moved to the grounds of the Bell School in Adams, Tennessee, in the park, and it's now known as the Bell Log Cabin. The cabin was originally on the John Bell farm, based on the Tennessee Historical Commission's study from a long time ago. That little cabin was built between uh, late 1700s, like maybe 1795 up until about 1805. We know that John Bell and his family got there or were there by 1805. So we don't know if John Bell and his sons actually built that house or not, but that's how old that cabin is.
That's
Wow.
incredible.
And I've spent the night in that cabin before myself, and I've seen had a few little strange things happen up there. So
Now, you've
very
spent a lot of time in the area, and I know you're mentioning a few strange things that have happened. Um, what was I seeing? Oh, I know what it was. Let me flip through here. Um, one of the stories that I thought was cool too was when you were out taking video, and it started storming, and you see the rabbits in the cemetery.
Yeah, yeah, that was interesting. Well, there was the rabbits, and then there was also a singular rabbit in the cemetery. Happened the same day, though.
Hmm.
One of these, I was working on a video about the Bell Witch, and this has been probably years ago, and I had cameras and equipment out there, and there was a place near the Bats Cemetery. Public road goes pretty close to that, and I was stopped on the public road, and I was going to check out my cameras, so I just decided to shoot a little bit of what we call B-roll, and I was putting my camera out over the field, just looking at the field, and I noticed these rabbits playing, a little group of rabbits playing there in the field. So I zoomed in on them and recorded them playing and running around for probably 5 minutes or so. Put up the camera, stopped recording, put up the camera and everything. But then when I got back home and started going through my footage, I saw that field clear as day and where I was panning the camera different ways and everything, but the rabbits were missing.
Which is
Hmm.
so weird.
It
That's
is
strange.
weird. It is weird.
So
Uh,
what were they? Were they not rabbits? Kind of makes you wonder.
was I hallucinating and they weren't there to begin with? Were they really there? Were they like one scientist told me that it probably had to do with oxidation in the film? You know, or is it really something maybe supernatural? I mean, on more than one occasion, the Bell Witch was known to manifest in the form of a rabbit.
Really?
Oh, wow.
Yes, that was the most common
Interesting.
manifestation when there was an apparition.
Huh.
It appeared as other things too, but the rabbit was the big one.
And that's
Wow.
that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, it would say, did you see this big rabbit sitting off to itself on a rock when you were on the way home from school?
Hmm.
They'd say yes, and they'd say, I was that rabbit. But
Oh.
I heard what you said about so and so or such and such.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, very thing had a gift of gab, but yeah, the rabbit's interesting. The other one happened the same day. I was at a graveyard and taking a look around it. I was actually looking for a couple of graves that I'd been told were there. That's part of the research process. If somebody lived and died, I can look them up. You know, finding the gravestone with their name on it, if I can, is just part of the research process and validating it that this person really was alive.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Because if they're dead, that means they were alive at some
Yeah,
point. At
correct.
some point, yeah. So there is this one big gravestone. I couldn't tell much about it. There was nothing on the side, but it was about as tall as I was. And I noticed this rabbit kind of goofing off and playing around there. So I thought, what the heck? I'm from out in the country anyway. So I'm gonna have some fun with a rabbit. So I started chasing it around and all that. So he all of a sudden darted into this hole, or like a little burrow that had been dug under the edge of that gravestone.
Oh, geez.
He went in there. I talked. I think I sang a little bit. I cursed a little bit. Then said a prayer for forgiveness for cursing near somebody's grave. Um, and finally, I just took my hand and slapped it against the gravestone right above where that little burrow was to get him to come out. As soon as my hand hit the gravestone, I hear this baby just crying and just screaming bloody murder,
Oh no.
almost as though I had slapped the gravestone. It was like I'd slapped a baby or
Oh,
something.
my goodness.
And in all fairness, I'm about 95% sure that that was a coincidence, and that since it was in the summertime, the people next to this graveyard, there were several houses there. Somebody had a window open, they had a baby in there, and just by coincidence, the baby started crying and screaming at the exact same time I hit that.
You
What
hope.
timing, though?
Yeah, and then when I finally kept having problems with the fact that the gravestone didn't say anything, and I pulled myself up to the very top and looked, and there was an inscription there. Of course, I guess it was on the top because they wanted to have it pointed to heaven or something.
Yeah.
I looked at the top, and it was gravestone, a huge gravestone for an infant baby.
Oh, wow.
Oh
So
wow.
yeah, that was one of
You're
the
like,
stranger things I
oops.
ran into. But
Oh no.
I'm still going to take the dull path on that, the skeptical path, and say it's
Yeah.
coincidence. But one heck of a story.
It is. It's very
Yeah, it
interesting.
really is. Okay. Did you have any more on the Bell Witch you wanted to talk about, Pam?
No, I didn't. Actually, those were the biggies that I wanted to hit on. So,
Okay. So we kind of want to go over. He's got a few books. We have a couple of them, and I know he's attributed to some other ones that I would love to have him speak on. But Pam and I both just got finished reading The Ghostly Cries from Dixie. Oh, she got
yes.
pulled up there.
Yep.
Yeah. Really great book, especially for those of you who love, like shorter tales, but they're a little bit more in depth than just a quick overview of the story. Like we said before, Pat's a fantastic researcher. You get to hear so much interesting information about some tales you probably already know, because he covers like Waverly Hills. Who doesn't know Waverly Hills? Brown Mountain Lights,
Which I
Marie
love.
Laveau, yeah, Sloss Furnace, the
Hmm.
LaLaurie Mansion, which has always been one of my favorites. St. Augustine Lighthouse, he really hit some of the big ones. And then there were some other ones I'd never actually heard of before, which is saying something because Pam and I deep dive so much stuff.
Yeah.
Um, did you have a favorite one out of Dixie?
Oh, I have a lot of favorites out of that out of that book. I live for Southern folklore, or Southern ghost lore, I guess is a
Hmm.
better way to put it, and love hearing and telling those stories. And the approach I took with Ghostly Cries from Dixie was to take these stories, some of which are well known locations, and others that are very obscure, and do the historical research on all of those. Look for reasons what would make them conducive to a haunting, and then actually go and investigate those places, or interview people who have investigated the places, and look at what evidence has come from these different locations, how it can be correlated back to the history of the locations, which in some cases it can't. And then tell my thoughts on the place and the different stories there, and then provide the reader in one section of the book a place where they can read about how to get to these places to visit them, assuming, of course, that they're open to the public. And of course, there's a disclaimer saying it's not my fault if you choose to trespass.
Smart.
So. Yeah, and I only listed those places that were open to the public at the time. So, at any rate, my favorite story, I love the story of the Greenbrier Ghost.
Yes.
I also love the story of the Georgia town and Lorenzo Dow.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, that was Jacksonboro, Georgia,
Hmm.
and that was amazing. I say this book is a collection of ghost stories from the South. Well, it's actually weird and ghostly stories. I would
Yeah.
consider the Lorenzo Dow story very more of a weird story.
It is odd, isn't it? I'm
It
gonna
is. It's
I love that one too, and that actually I pulled a picture of the house and the historical marker. So if you don't mind talking a little bit about it, I'll pull those up so we can
okay.
see it
So
clear.
Jacksonboro, Georgia. If you go about halfway between Macon and Savannah in Georgia, you'll see an old road kind of off the beaten path leading past a few fields and through a bunch of woods. That is Jacksonboro, Georgia, as it is today. Back in the early 1800s, even before Bell Witch times, way back then, Jacksonboro was a very flourishing little town, mainly people in the logging business, and some pretty wild and rowdy people. Jacksonboro was known for its wild and rowdy saloons and all kinds of cane that the people there were raising all the time. Well, it so happens that a very well known worldwide evangelist by the name of Lorenzo Dow from up in the Northeast made a special trip to speak to the Georgia legislature at Atlanta one time. And while on that trip, he heard people talking about what was going on down to the south, way down in Jacksonboro, and all of these womanizers, gamblers, drinkers, fighters, and well, I guess what we call today hellraisers,
Yeah.
all that going on. He heard about it and decided that he needed to pay the place a visit and have a revival. Well, Lorenzo Dow had the reputation of being one of the most prominent and strongest hellfire and brimstone preachers who ever lived. So you think about that, then you think about all the goons living down in Jacksonboro. I mean, you've got a recipe for any number of things to end up transpiring. So he walked on to Jacksonboro. It's another interesting thing about him. They say he never rode a horse to anywhere. Everywhere
Huh.
he went, he walked. So he walked down to Jacksonboro. I guess it probably took him a month to get there from Atlanta. I don't know. He showed up in the town and got him some paper and some stuff to draw with and made him posters, started hanging them up around the little town advertising a revival that night. And sure enough, he had his revival. People were yelling at him, cursing at him, spitting at him, throwing stuff at him, wanting to kill him. I mean, as a hellfire and brimstone preacher, I mean, he was right in front of all these people, pointing at them, telling them they were going to go to hell and all this other stuff. So they became very, very angry. And at the conclusion of his revival, and I doubt he converted anybody that night, but at the conclusion, some of the townspeople formed a mob. They were going to lynch him, take him outside of town, and hang him. Well, they successfully surrounded him. They were just about to take him. And one man from the town, his name was Seaborn Goodall, talked with this mob and convinced them that if they would let Dow go, that he would keep Dow at his house that night and then make sure that crack of dawn the next morning that Lorenzo Dow would walk away and to never be seen again in Jacksonboro. So they agreed to it, and Mr. Goodall took the Reverend Dow to his house, put him up for the night. The next morning, Dow woke up, crack of dawn, walked out the door, got ready to get on his way, and there was that angry mob. Crack of dawn, they were still out there in the woods waiting on him. They decided they were going to get him after he left Goodall's house. Well, he started walking right their direction, just straight right up in their faces. And he got up to a bridge, took off his shoes, looked at them, and placed a curse on them and their sinful town. Then turned around and walked off. He was never seen or heard from again in those parts. Well, a year or two later, all the crops in the area started failing. There were two major floods, one of which killed almost all of the livestock in the area. There were fires galore, saloons, houses, buildings, everything burning. And by a couple years after all that had begun, Jacksonboro was nothing but a wasteland, and all the residents had moved away, and that was it. Well, fast forward to nowadays. As I said, you see the woods and a field, and you're way out there in the boonies of South Georgia. Well, there is one building from Jacksonboro that still sits there, and that building is a house that belonged to none other than Seaborn Goodall, the man who put Lorenzo Dow up for the night. So apparently he was exempted from the curse. His house is still standing there today, and you've got a picture of it right there. So
Yeah,
that's the story of that.
That is the craziest story
Yep.
too. I mean,
it is.
Everything else was destroyed. The town was
yeah,
obliterated, but not
completely.
any damage to that house there.
That's insane.
It's crazy. And I think it's hysterical that it was the evangelist who ended up putting the curse, the one guy who shouldn't be believing in curses.
Right. Yeah. But putting on my researcher's hat, what we have here is an old house and the name of an owner and the name of an evangelist who may or may not have ever visited the area, and perhaps some people way back through several layers of folklore who had wished that the evangelist visited that sinful town.
Yep,
And a story could have evolved around the house.
that's
And, you know,
very possible.
possible, but I don't know. I mean, we have this folklore here about the curse and all that. People enjoy hearing it. I enjoy hearing it. I enjoy telling it. But, as a researcher, I see it more as of an old house that probably has a lot of stories to tell, but we don't know what stories. So by golly, let's make up some stories and push them out. One of those, typically, it's amazing. I know we haven't touched too much on my career or anything, but one theme to the career is I'm always getting emails from people who buy old houses and places that are haunted. And hey, Pat, help me think up some stories of this place. Or Pat,
Oh no.
will you write me something and certify that this place is haunting and sign your name on it? And I'm like, no,
Oh
no, no.
no.
And then, of course, a couple of months later, they've got the place open for haunted
Mhm.
tours and this, that, and the other.
Yep.
But
Yes.
the whole Seaborn Goodall thing, Lorenzo Down, may all be true.
Yeah.
I don't know. It may all be true, but it may just be a coincidence with Goodall's home. I mean, after all, I think Goodall was probably the only man in town who was ever sober. Maybe he was the only one that built his
Yes.
house correctly. I don't know. I don't know, but it's very interesting, strange story. And another one, which I don't know that we'll have time to go through the whole thing or anything, but the Greenbrier Ghost up on Greenbrier
Yes.
Mountain in West Virginia. What's interesting in that, a lot of details involved, and I've really done a lot of research into that one. But the gist of it is there is a young female living with another lady who's a relative, and they're very what you would say very low economic status, not a lot of money, very poor, and this young man comes to town and meets this young girl, And he starts showing interest in her. She's interested in him. There's something really strange about this dude. The girl's aunt picked up on it right away and tried to discourage her from seeing the guy. The guy's name, get this, I mean, this is funny enough as a book anyway. The guy's name was Erasmus Stribling Trout Shoe. I
They
mean,
have
that might have
terrible
been
parents.
a bit of. I was gonna say, maybe he made him want to kill his parents. I don't know. He killed enough other people. So, but
No, it
at
does.
any rate, that's one heck of a name. But I'm sure people back then would think my name is strange too. So, and some other people had, you know, like offered him work because he'd come to town as like a drifter, and a couple of the other people in town, men in town, for some reason, they couldn't put their finger on what it was, but they just didn't take a liking to this guy. They couldn't uh, just couldn't trust him for some reason. Well, one thing led to another, and uh, I'll just call the guy Trout. He and the girl, whose name was Zoner Heaster, they married, and they got themselves a little house, and he found a steady job, making a little bit of money doing blacksmith service, or like as a blacksmith's apprentice there in the mountains of West Virginia. Well, all of a sudden one day the girl Zona was found dead mysteriously at the bottom of the steps at the house, and Trout acted like he was, very upset and said, "Oh, she must have fallen down the steps," and so on and so forth, blah blah blah. So they had the funeral, and oddly enough, he would never leave her casket, but he didn't seem to be very mournful. But anytime somebody tried to move the scarf that was around her neck or this little shroud on her head, he would go berserk, making sure that they didn't look under that scarf, or the what do you call it? I just said a shroud type thing. And the aunt thought that that was very weird, especially the fact that the guy was not mournful at all. He did not seem upset. He was just like he was there to make sure nobody messed with her scarf. Well, after she was buried, a few nights later, her aunt was lying in bed reading and looked up, and there was Zona at the foot of the bed. And Zona explained that Trout was a very belligerent and abusive husband, and that they were in a big fight, and he strangled her and then broke her neck. And that's how she really died. So the aunt went to the district attorney and told him that. And of course, he laughed about it. So you're telling me the girl's ghost came to you, and this ghost says this and this and this, and so on. Well, he did agree to finally have the grave exhumed and have some other person, not the person that was checked her out before, but another medical examiner type person to check her out. And they did that, and they found her injuries were consistent with what the ghost had told her aunt. Her neck had been broken, and that kind of goes in line with the scarf, and him wanting to make sure the scarf is a certain way, where maybe somebody can't
Yep.
tell that he'd gone and snapped her neck. Um, so what came out of that was the first and only time in history that the hearsay testimony from a ghost was used to convict a man of murder.
Mhm.
And Trout Shoe was
Mm.
found guilty. I'm sure his defense attorney was going berserk. How are you convicting my
Yeah.
client of murder on the testimony, hearsay testimony at that, of a ghost? Sounded crazy, but the jury, I believed it all. And, the fact that, ghost or no ghost, she had the wounds that showed her neck
Oh,
had been broken. And
Mhm.
around that time, people had already had, you know, checked out trout a little more and come to the understanding that he had been married before and his previous wife had disappeared without a trace. And then there was somebody else at some other point that was murdered and he was considered a suspect. So,
Yeah.
not a nice guy. And he was sentenced to the West Virginia State Penitentiary in Moundsville, which I also cover in the Ghostly
Yes.
Cries from Dixie book. Uh, Segue into that. But no, really, he stayed there at Moundsville for a little while, but he died there of disease, as did many of the inmates.
Mm.
And he was buried in a mass grave there at Moundsville. So
It's
that's the
fitting
story.
ending for him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you can go there. Greenbrier Mountain. Um, it's been a long time since I've been, but I'm told that the house that they lived in is still standing or partially
Oh,
standing.
really?
Yeah, and this was like the late 1800s
Hmm.
when this happened, and also Zona's grave is can be visited. It's in the graveyard off a little country church up on the side of the mountain.
Cool.
Yeah, and they also have a historical sign up there about the Greenbrier ghost.
Nice.
Yeah. Anyway, that
That's a
was
good one too.
yeah, for sure. And then I talked about some experiences I had at Waverly Hills,
Mm.
St. Augustine Lighthouse, and of course I had to talk about the Brown Mountain Lights.
Of course.
That's on my bucket list is to
Yeah.
go to Brown Mountain.
Yeah.
Oh
The
yeah.
book is a basic bucket list of many, many places I would love to go
Yes.
see. Um, I was actually going to talk to you a little bit. I was a little surprised. I ran onto the Devil's Tramping Ground uh, in North Carolina. And I was super interested in it because in my research, I've actually found two other places nearly identical to that. And in fact, Pam was mentioning we were talking about it backstage before we had you on, Pat, and
Yeah.
the Delphos Ring in
Mhm.
Kansas kind of reacts very much the same. Did you want to talk a little bit about what the tramping ground is, and then uh, we can discuss it a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, we could talk a little bit about that. I'm just looking over here at the chat. Hello,
Yeah.
Minnesota Association of Paranormal Study. Hey, how you doing? Ken, I've never heard of that guy. Have you ever heard of Ken? Okay, of course. Yeah, hey, Ken, how's
He's.
it going?
It sounds vaguely familiar. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I may have talked to him last night. I don't
I
know.
think we all, or at least Pam and I, we had dinner with him. What back in October, I believe it
We
was,
had the
at the
never-ending dinner.
at
Yes.
the Arkansas. Oh God, don't get me started on that recipe. But it was like that. It's been like that every year. But I'm pretty sure they're going to be finding a better place to stay next time.
Fingers crossed
But
for sure.
yeah, I mean, we're always out somewhere eating dinner and shooting the paranormal with paranormal folks. But that's okay. That's an
Absolutely.
awful lot of fun. The Devil's Tramping Ground.
Yeah.
Okay, there is near the town of Siler City, North Carolina, just off of a highway, a perfect circle in the middle of the woods. And in that circle, no plants will grow whatsoever. It is completely bare, and it's an absolute perfect circle. Animals have started to walk across that circle, then gone back. I don't know what they're scared of something there, or they're not seeing any food or vegetation there, and they think that's weird because
Yeah.
of all the vegetation around it. But
Mm.
that's essentially the Devil's Tramping Ground. People gave that name to it long ago, and it became a very popular hangout for teenagers, for people to go to drink beer and hang out. There are different stories about it, like on certain nights with full moon, that the devil dances there, dances in that
Mhm.
circle. Uh, there are some Native American legends, which I don't think, I've heard them referred to as Native American legends, but I think they're more opinions of the Native American perspective given by people in modern times, uh, of what that might be, or, how that circle was cursed in some
Mhm.
way. forbidden ground. And a lot of people have gone there to check it out, in addition to teenagers wanting to go out and drink beer and hang. Um, I've been there, I've looked at it too. Um, you know, there have been a lot of studies done. I think one of the most interesting was when a major university nearby, I can't remember if it was Duke or one of the other ones, but
Mhm.
so a professor from there did some analysis of the soil inside the ring and outside the ring. And it was completely different. And
Mhm.
and he concluded that the reason the soil wouldn't grow anything inside of that ring was because it had such a high content of sodium.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And there was another thing he mentioned, but I don't remember the name of that. But a chemical issue where in the perfect circle the ground has such a high concentration, nothing will grow there. Now, as a researcher, I came up with my own theory on that, and come to find out somebody else did too, and it was the same theory. And that was based on the fact that old timers in the area have said that years and years ago, a grain silo stood right there on that spot.
Interesting.
Now, you're talking a grain silo, probably made of metal. You've got
Mhm.
grain in there. You're going to have water drip and stuff. You're going to have powder and all kinds of different chemicals off that grain
Yeah.
draining straight down into that circle below that grain silo. So I think that's the source of the chemicals. The silo is what cut the circle, kind of like a stencil, and then all these chemicals from the grain, plus probably some artificial chemicals too, all that going into the ground for so many years is what made it sterile.
Just, yeah, sterilize the land.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's also
Mhm.
been theorized that it is a UFO landing area,
Mhm.
Mhm.
or more specifically, that a UFO landed there at a certain point, and the energy from the craft that landed there was so strong that it just baked everything and the nutrients in the ground beneath it. So, a lot of different theories out there.
That's kind of what it made me think. That's why it made me think of the Delphos ring, because that is what occurred in Delphos, Kansas. Was There was a boy, his name was Ronnie. He was feeding the family sheep, and he happened to see a craft take off and wobble off basically. And he hollered at his parents, and they came out and they watched it too. But that area, a ring did stay in the ground. It's there to this day. And I want to say this happened in the early 50s, early to mid 50s. But they got to the point they just covered it up with more ground because
Mhm.
people wouldn't stop coming to their farm. It's
Oh,
very
yeah.
close to Kansas State University, and they have an agricultural college there. And they came out and did a lot of taking samples and trying to find out what it was. And it was some very odd um, chemical makeup in it as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ken is asking, how big was the circle? Do you
I,
know, Pat?
I didn't measure it. I have heard some accounts saying it was like 20 to 21 feet in diameter.
Oh, so it's pretty good sized.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, you
Hmm,
think of it's a grain
interesting.
silo, and if you've ever
Yeah,
been around a grain silo, I mean, you think of them being tall, but then you look at the diameter across or the circumference around them, and they're pretty big.
yeah.
Hmm.
I think
Yeah.
Ken also,
Oh, go ahead.
I think Ken also mentioned about needing to check out the grave site, I guess, of Trout Shoe up in Moundsville. Um, he's not in a marked grave. Now, if they show you, or which they should show you, the area where some mass graves were, then that's where he would be buried. But there's not a dedicated like grave and gravestone for him there.
He didn't need one anyway.
Well, yeah, there is that theory. There is that.
Yeah, so I was gonna say, in my research, I've actually found two other places that really match this description. It's the same kind of phenomenon that is happening. One, in the deep wooded areas of eastern Pennsylvania, there's a similar circle with the same kind of high strangeness going on around it. And there's a secondary one that I found in the New Jersey Pine Barrens. Actually has nothing to do with the Jersey Devil legend, but has that same kind of lore around it that perhaps the devil danced the circle right there. Interestingly enough, about the one in the Pine Barrens, it is so far back in the area of the Pine Barrens itself that it's not highly walked around or anything. It's a very deep part of the woods where not a lot of people go.
Right.
It's basically run into by hunters and stuff. So that one interests me a lot because it's, it couldn't possibly be a silo, I wouldn't think, unless someone long ago had.
Years and years ago, maybe.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
always got to look back.
Yeah.
Always got to, a lot of times though, there's not any information or enough information on what
Yeah.
happened long ago. But yeah, that's really, really interesting. You're talking about kind of out off the beaten path and where people don't go.
Extraordinary. The For those of you at home that don't know, the New Jersey Pine Barrens are largely uninhabitable. Uh, it's very swampy. It's extraordinarily dense. Things can't be easily grown there, so it didn't really lend itself, even to like way back when, for it to have people settling within the Pine Barrens itself, because it was not hospitable. It was
Yeah.
not a good place to live,
Right.
especially when you could go a few miles this way or that way and be in a nice, open meadow area where you could grow your crops and have your livestock and, build a home. So,
Yeah. Well, so at this place, are there any stories of ghost lights or spook lights at night?
yes.
Because you
Yeah.
said swampy and marshy, and the first thing I thought of was methane gas.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I thought, I bet there've been ghost light sightings out there too. But it's
Oh, yeah.
amazing. Certain, certain things or places that are paranormally themed, like where you're talking about there, the Pines
Hmm.
and Devil's Tramping Ground in North Carolina. There are multiple instances of certain types of places. You've got that. You've got ghost lights.
Hmm.
How many places besides the Mountain Lights do you see ghost lights?
Oh,
All
Several.
tons.
over.
There's Marfa. There's just ton of ghost lights out there.
Yeah.
We have ghost lights in our, well, I don't know if they're ghost lights so much. Well, they're a lot like the Brown Mountain Lights and Martha, just in our area, just
Yeah. And
not
the
even 10
Hornet spook
miles
light.
away.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then you also have what I call the every town legend. Every town has this legend.
Mhm.
Uh, Pretty much any country town or rural town, especially in the South, you go to, you start asking some of the people about any spooks or haunts. No matter what town it is, they'll tell you you go out such and such road. It'll probably be called something like New Hope Road or something like that, since every rural community has a New Hope Road. And go out there, and there's a bridge over the creek. And if you stop your car, you will hear these babies cry, or
Yeah.
hear a baby crying and push it across there. They call it Crybaby Bridge.
Yep.
Every town in the South's got something like that. And then another one, which I actually put in Ghostly Cries from Dixie, called the Chapel Hill Ghost Light.
Hmm.
That
Hmm.
ghost light falls under the same categories like Marfa and all the other ghost light places out there, but the story behind it is very common. There was a train wreck, or a train ran over a conductor when they were switching trains on the track. He was decapitated, and the light you see going back and forth up the railroad track is the light of the conductor's lantern as he walks up and down the tracks looking for his lost head.
Yeah. Very common one.
Now, interestingly enough, I did find out there was a train wreck there. Well, not a wreck, but a train person who was run over by a train there and killed. And he was not decapitated, but he was killed. And the way this came about, it's in a little town called Chapel Hill, Tennessee, on the CSX Railroad going south out of Nashville. And first of all, I went there before and I captured video, and I did in fact capture the exact same phenomenon that others have said they've seen. Now, of course, I could not see a headless train conductor looking for his head, but the light kind of moving back and forth, coming up the track and then going back, I did see that. And there have been a lot of explanations for that over the years. But at any rate, I was down in Chapel Hill one day quite a few years ago giving a lecture on the Bell Witch and then delivering a storytelling session with local ghost stories. And I, of course, talked about the Chapel Hill ghost lights since the train track was right behind the nursing home. So we get done. I get done with all that, and this older man, very old man, who was a resident there, came up, and he said that it was true, not the headless thing, but that there was a person get run over there. He worked at the funeral home when they brought the guy in. So he was the one that told me, yes, the guy was hit. There is something to that, but he was not decapitated. So anything, I thought that was kind of interesting. And again, I just love meeting people at these events. You meet some really interesting people.
And you can hear, it's fun to hear the local flavor of the story itself, and to find out those things, like there really was a guy. Pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And that same story, you hear it everywhere. Now, whether there was actually a train conductor run over at every single city that you hear about this, I don't know, but this guy claims it was real. At least the part about getting run over, but he was not decapitated.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you another one I heard, strange one. This was for an event I was doing. I think this one was a ghost hunting class. So you want to be a ghost hunter as a ghost hunting class, followed by like a 3-hour investigation where the students would actually get to go on an investigation. So I was talking to a guy during the break in the class, and he swore to me, and his wife swore to me too. There was a cousin of theirs who had recently died and wanted to be buried with his cell phone. Why, I don't know, but he said that the family had decided really against doing that. But right before they closed the casket, one of the family members had the guy's cell phone and did slip it down into the side of the casket right before they closed the casket. And he was buried with a cell phone. So this man and woman tell me that about 3 weeks later, about 2:30 one afternoon, they get a phone call and they look, and the caller ID is this guy's cell phone that he was buried with.
That's wild.
Yeah, that was crazy. Like, well, did you answer it? And they're like, oh no, we didn't know what to do. Yeah, this was his number. And it was in the afternoon, 3 weeks later. And I could have provided not a research, but a logical explanation for that, but I didn't want to gross anybody out or anything. But I stood with electrical conductivity and different things carrying electricity. But they got a phone call from it. I thought that was an interesting story.
That is hilarious.
I wouldn't have answered it either, I don't think.
Just in case.
I don't know whether I would have answered it or not. I don't know. That would definitely be pretty darn startling.
That would be.
Would be. I mean, what do you say? You'd be like, hello? Hoping that what do you hope for on the other end?
Get me out of here. Get me out of here. Or,
right?
Oh, no. Come here. Or, damn, it's hot down here. Can you get me out of here?
That's funny. One of the other stories I really like in here is the Gray Man. That's seen on the South Carolina coast.
Oh, yeah.
I think that one's so cool. because he has been spotted a bit. And I think, if I remember correctly, you wrote this in 2009. Is that right? Am I getting
That sounds about right. Yeah.
I looked up to see if there had been any other sightings since that time of the gray man, and there has been.
Yeah.
He showed up again in 2018, right before Hurricane Florence, too. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. What's so intriguing about that is that there have been so many witnesses to this guy describing the same guy, and it transcends the level of local lore because people from out of town who've come there, didn't even live there, come there for the first time, have seen this guy.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
Yeah. And, to think of who he might be, there's no telling. And
Yeah, I
these
know.
sightings have been going on for years too.
Mhm.
I mean, is it some immortal person that they're seeing who just happened to live a very long time
Yeah,
and
who knows?
whose jacket still fits them?
Yeah,
Yeah, I know it's strange, but yeah, the diversity of the audience, all these diverse sightings,
yeah.
always the same description, and always right before the bad weather rolls in.
And like, it's not just like your run of the mill bad weather either. It's like the devastating stuff.
Right, the hurricanes and everything.
Yeah, pretty wild. Great stories. I would highly encourage anyone, if you're interested in things like this, we both got our notes in there.
There
Ghostly
you go.
Dixie,
Yeah.
really good. And
Yeah.
The Bell Witch, the full account.
And the Bell Witch. So I will most definitely be putting links to get these books on our Facebook page after the show, so you can go and grab your own copy. Really good stuff. Like I really enjoyed Ghostly Cries because
Yeah,
it wasn't a super long read, but it had some dirt in it. It had a little bit of research behind it, so you weren't just hearing the tale and then moved along.
yeah,
But I think that's the researcher and me and Pam. We really
yeah,
like those little extra details
for
that went
sure.
along with it.
For
Yeah, well, I'm
sure.
glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Very
So,
good.
do you want to talk a little bit about maybe some other things you've kind of contributed to, or you would like the people at home to check out?
Okay, some other books I worked on. One was called Weird US.
Mm.
That book began as part of a series. It was actually called Weird New Jersey. And then
Oh,
from
okay.
there, they started doing a weird series with different states and everything. And then Weird US, which is everything, covers the whole country, weirdness across the United States. But I had wrote one, possibly two, I think, chapters in there. Uh, One about the Bell Witch. I can't remember the other one. It's been a while, but Weird US, that was
Hmm.
initially published by Barnes and Noble Press, and you don't hear about it too much anymore. But I mean, it's still out there. You can buy used copies. The thing is,
Hmm.
with those big publishers, they'll only run so many copies, and then they just kind of like put them on the back burner.
Yeah.
But I thought it was a very interesting book, and I know when it came out, an awful lot of people bought that.
Hmm.
Another one that I worked on is called The Legend of Stuckey's Bridge, written by Lori Crane. And she asked me to write the foreword to that book. So that's what I did on that. And it's a story about an old rickety bridge in Mississippi, very old bridge in rural Mississippi. And when it was being built back in the early 1900s as a replacement to another bridge before that, the builders discovered bodies buried at the edge of the river very near that old bridge,
Wow.
Oh
or
wow.
the site of where they were tearing up the old bridge and putting in the new bridge, which is now over 100 years old, Stuckey's Bridge. And there wasn't much of anything mentioned about it at the time. Some thought maybe old graves like a Native American burial ground or something, but Nobody thought anything about like a murder case or anything like that. But one person there, who I think was a coroner at the time, had commented that, some of these graves looked to be very old. Others looked like they'd been buried only in the past few years. They were completely unmarked graves. There were no caskets, anything. So Lori did her research, a lot of research on that, and came to find out that there was a fellow who lived right next to the bridge, or not the bridge that's there now, but the bridge that was there back in about 1850 at the same spot. He had himself a little lodge or a little inn, because that road that crossed that bridge was the only road back in those days through that part of Mississippi. And weary travelers would come there and stay. Well, when he would get weary travelers who appeared to have a lot of money, he would make sure he ended up with the money and that they ended up buried in the side of the riverbank.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. And it went on for quite some time. So her book goes through all of that. The guy, Stuckey, he actually was a former member of a an outlaw gang. It was called the Dalton Gang. You heard
Yeah,
of the Dalton? Yeah.
we're very
So
familiar with them.
yeah, yeah. So the book, goes into a lot of detail about that, and the foreword that I have mainly talks about the history of the bridge and the different apparitions that have been seen there over the years and other things, and how it conjures up such an eerie feeling, and how when Lori first showed me the manuscript to that, I was just really thrilled. And, I complimented her, I mean, this is an absolutely perfect work of fiction. And she gave me kind of a funny look. What do you mean? I said, well, I mean, it has to be fiction. I mean, nothing so horrible as what you've written about could have ever happened in real life. So it has to be fiction, right? She's like, nope. So yeah,
Real deal.
yeah, it was
Real deal.
quite the thing. And that,
Mm,
and that book actually turned right around and became a Amazon bestseller and stayed an Amazon bestseller for a long
nice.
time. Yeah.
wow. I'll have to
That's
check
really
it
cool.
out.
Yeah, we're really familiar with the Daltons. They actually were killed in Coffeyville, which is only like 20 miles from where we live.
Hmm.
Yeah. This guy was, he had ridden with him at some point, and I know there was a coffee mill. I didn't know that's where they were killed.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Sure
We
was. They're
actually,
buried in Coffeyville too.
wow.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and you
So,
talk about the story of the Stuckey's Bridge, and basically a serial killer. It kind of boils down to. It made me
yeah,
think of we have the Bloody Benders
yeah.
that are very close to Cherryville, which is I don't know what 30 miles from where we are.
Yeah. About 30
That's a
miles.
crazy story too. So
Bloody Benders. What's that about?
it's
Oh.
Kate Bender, Ma and Pa Bender, and their supposed brother. Um, they set up basically a stop along a trail between uh, military forts, and people would go by there and stop for the evening and get dinner and spend the night. Well, people were not making it to their destinations, and when somebody got suspicious, when some of their family members didn't show up, they had stopped in there and asked, and they were like, we don't know what you're talking about, they didn't come by here. And the person was very suspicious because he knew they had to have, and so he rode on into town. He didn't stay the night. He rode on into town to report the suspicions to the sheriff. And when they went back out, the family had lit out. And what they found out was they had like it was a log cabin, and then in between was just a partition of like a big piece of canvas, and there was this really gross looking spot on it. And what they were doing was people would sit at the table and somebody behind the canvas would knock him in the head with a hammer and then drop him into the basement down below. And they were
Oh,
burying them out in their orchard,
Yeah.
robbing them blind and burying them. And
yeah.
you remember that? Does that
I
sound
wasn't
familiar?
I wasn't there, but I
I hope
actually,
not.
yeah, yeah. I'm sorry, but if I'm going to some strange place to eat or stay the night or whatever, and there's a canvas right behind me, I'm gonna look behind it. I'm sorry, but I
Right?
think I seems like I read up on that one time, and there
Hmm.
used to be some pictures on the internet
Yep.
of the house after they had all left. They didn't live there anymore, but pictures of
Yeah.
the house and a diagram of where different bodies were found
Yep.
Yeah, they found them
around.
everywhere. They
Yeah.
found them buried and in the well, and it's kind of interesting for our area right now. It's actually the property that it was set on is being excavated right now.
Hmm.
There's colleges in excavating it because what people don't realize is that when they stopped digging up bodies, they didn't stop because they ran out of bodies. They stopped because they couldn't stomach it anymore because
Yeah.
it just never ended.
Oh.
They just kept finding them, and they were getting to the point where they were finding mass graves full of just parts. They
Yeah.
didn't know what belonged to who, and it was mixed with adult and children.
Yeah.
Well,
So they
that is
literally just,
horrible.
yeah, they literally just stopped at one point, covered up what was there, and the house was pretty much gone by that time because the looky loos had come in and basically taken it
Took
apart piece by
took
piece
parts of the
to
house.
have
Yeah,
for souvenirs.
it's just
Um, yeah,
it's just horrible, to think any human being, even the lowest of the low, would stoop so as to do stuff like that. And then you talk about the bodies and the mass graves.
Yeah.
And one thing I've started researching a whole lot. In fact, I'm spending way too much time on it here these last couple of months, but I just can't get enough of it. Is the story of the Holocaust
Hmm.
and the concentration camps and the SS and the Nazi and all of that horrible loss of life over there.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's terrible.
Yeah.
Really quick, Ken Rollmuller asks, were the James brothers in the Dalton gang or only in the Quantrill and Anderson groups? The James brothers were not in the Dalton gang.
Hmm.
However, they
Oh,
did run the same paths. I wouldn't doubt that they had come across each other at some point or another. But no, the James brothers were not in the Dalton gang.
and that's another southern thing too, real southern thing. No matter what town you're in the South, there will be certain towns members who say Jesse James used to live at such and such house
Yep.
down the road for a while.
Or
Jesse
the
James used to live everywhere.
or Jesse James's name is carved in the cave back on so and so's property,
Yeah.
which there
Well,
are a
very
couple of
well,
those around the area.
very well
So
could have
Right.
been.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
there could have been up to 5 Jesse Jameses, but that's
that's
for a
true.
whole different show.
That's true.
Right.
Yeah.
And I didn't even care about it. And when I came along and got of age to be interested in things, I wasn't about, studying that kind of stuff or Jesse James. I was more interested in finding out about Jesse's girl, so to
Oh,
speak. That's what I was into. I was into girls more than I was into studying outlaws.
that's
I
funny.
used to like
Really
watch a
like
lot of
Springfield.
outlaw shows on the TV.
I don't know. Maybe we'll have to do a show on that sometime. The whole multiple Jesse Jameses and the KGC and the Southern Gold Hordes. So that would be a
That would
fun
be
show to
yeah,
do.
that would be.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's
Add
a
it to the
lot of that.
list.
There's a lot of that, and I don't know that a show like that would be wonderful. We could cover a lot of ground. I think it would also be a very enlightening for a lot of the listeners.
Hmm.
Um, some people might get a little offended by it. Because another thing you can do, if you're a big fan of catfish dinners, especially southern fried catfish and hush puppies and the coleslaw and all that good stuff that I love. It's my life ingredient. But did you know pretty much there is one family pretty much in every town around the South that will tell you that their cousin or their granddaddy was the one who invented the hush puppy. Seriously.
Yeah.
I know of four different people right here in Tennessee who have relatives or had relatives that they said invented the hush puppy.
That's fun.
Well,
Now,
I don't know who did, but I appreciate them. I'm
Yeah.
sure. I
yeah,
love hush
I
puppies.
think
Kudos.
it was actually really a case of people doing the same thing around the same time period, putting the cornmeal in there and just frying it up like that,
Yeah.
probably to give to their dog to make him stop barking, hence the name hush puppy. But it
That's funny.
it comes out as, everybody invented the hush puppy. And the song by Michael Jackson, Beat It,
Hmm.
the guitar solo in there. Half the guitarists in California have at one time or another claimed to be the one to have played that when they weren't. I could go on and on about that. No, that's part of being a researcher and the type of research I do and the constant observations I do of human behavior. You know, I'm
Yep.
I'm kind of
Yeah.
I guess some people call me a researcher, some people call me a creep or an old creep now is what people call me. But yeah, I observe and take notes.
Yeah, and you're a musician too, so
Yes.
Unfortunately, I'm guilty as charged.
nothing unfortunate about that at
No.
all.
Well, when your equipment's packed over here in the corner and you've got a special area of a room in your new house for your studio, and you've always got so much to do, you can't even unpack the crap.
That sucks.
So,
It'll
yeah,
come.
I've got the music room to unpack. I've got all kinds of stuff, to unpack and rooms to set up and everything.
And
But,
you've only been there, what, 2 or 3 weeks? You haven't been there that long yet, full time.
well, my daughter and I took possession on February the 21st, and we did a very slow, progressive move, a little bit each time to cut back on the amount of time that the movers would have to do.
Yeah.
This $200 an hour is for the birds. So,
No joke.
well, no, they're actually worth it, very much worth it. But, haul all we can. And then April 1st, on April Fool's Day, I had the movers get the big stuff from the other place and bring it here. So we've technically, our first night spent here was April the 1st.
Nice.
And I've been doing nothing but going to work and sleeping ever since. I haven't had a chance to do much of anything else.
I bet.
But it's coming along. And, the music thing, there's always this instrument I'm looking for, which for about the past 6 months, it's been a new keyboard, and, trying to find one of those at an affordable price and one that I like, it's a pretty big challenge.
Oh, I bet.
And now with everything the way it is right now, I wouldn't have anywhere to put it anyway. Like
Yeah.
how it worked out.
How
So
fun.
we're coming down towards the end of the hour, which means we're going to be starting notebook games here pretty quick. But we thought we would ask, and you can absolutely turn us down. But we got to hear a really great story the evening that we went to your lecture and had dinner with you afterwards. And we were wondering if you would be willing to retell it, the story of your first UFO conference and what happened after.
Yeah. Oh, in Kentucky, we went to dinner after my Paducah, Kentucky
Mm-hmm.
engagement here. Let me, 1 second here. I got to mute myself for a half second.
Okay.
This is
Okay.
great
Yeah.
Sorry
fun.
about that. Yeah. Yeah. A few minutes ago when you were talking, I had to mute because I was choking to death.
Oh,
Uh,
no.
No,
yeah.
please don't.
I'm in a third floor room, and the heat travels up, and it just got a
Oh,
little hot in here,
no.
and my sinuses went crazy. Yeah, after the Paducah, Kentucky event that night, I went to dinner with two hot, hot ladies. I don't think I've ever felt as more what do you call it, on top of the world or whatever. I mean, the idea of me dating or going anywhere with any ladies to begin with is totally unheard of. But then I have not one but two hotties there. Okay.
Oh, you
And of
make
course,
us blush.
no, I'm trying to make you send me a check, but no, I'm no, yeah, bad enough. I actually go to dinner with a lady and then I charge them a fee for it. But no, there's a word for that. I think David Lee Roth sang about that.
I think he did.
Just a gigolo or something
Yeah.
like that. Anyway, back
Yeah.
to reality, the UFO conference. For quite a while, the UFO community brought me into their conferences and other events to do lectures and meet people and to sell books. There are some ties or perceived ties between the UFOs and the Bell Witch, and certain things happening in the legend of the Bell Witch, and certain things happening with the land in that area that correlate back to certain UFO theories and everything. So there is an interest, or at least some interest, in the UFO community. So, one conference I went to, and this was a biggie. In fact, I think at the time it was the UFO conference, the one nobody ever wants to miss.
Mhm.
I think they called it either Journeys and Beyond or something like that. This was a major event at the Pensacola and Gulf Breeze area down there on the Gulf.
Mhm.
And like 1,000 or more people there, speakers, vendors, everything. So I go there and think, well, I actually had several interesting experiences with interesting people there, which
Mhm.
I don't have time to go through all of it. But, interesting thing, I did not know any of these UFO people, the speakers, because it's just not my area.
Mhm.
Nothing against it, but I'm not a UFO researcher. I didn't know who these guys were. And, some of them would come over to my booth and talk to me. We would have a good time. We would talk. I would ask questions about UFOs and theories, and, they would explain all this to me, and they would have Bell Witch questions. Um, One of them, after my Bell Witch lecture, he got up and gave his lecture and said that my Bell Witch lecture was the best lecture he had ever heard at any type of conference or convention, which that meant a lot, especially after I found out who the fellow was. But again, UFO's not my field. I didn't know. So that night, a couple of them I saw down in the lobby of the hotel, and they were like, "Hey, Pat, man, come on over here. Join us for dinner." So I sat down to dinner with those two guys and a couple of others, and oh, we had a ball. It was kind of weird because it was hard to talk because people kept coming up to us or taking pictures of us. I've never had that happen. I was thinking, wow, look at this notoriety. Maybe I'll just forget the Bell Witch and get into UFOs. A full paparazzi. But now that I know who these people are, I understood how all that came together. One of the guys, an author. In fact, I talked to him. He'd even give me a signed book. His name was Bud Hopkins, and he was apparently very big in the UFO field back then. Um,
Yes.
then this other guy who came over, we talked and talked and talked about all kinds of theories and conspiracies, everything else. And I later heard his name a lot. His name was Stanton Friedman. Did a lot of talking with him, had dinner with him too. He was in the group. And this other fellow, the one who opened up his lecture by saying my lecture was the best delivered he had ever heard in his life at any of these events. He was of a psychiatrist background, but his name was Dr. John Mack from up in the eastern U.S. Sadly enough, I think all three of those people have now passed on, and they were pretty much
Yeah.
up in years when I met
Mhm.
them years ago. But that was an interesting experience. Not knowing who these guys were, and there I was being treated like a buddy and a friend by these guys who were absolute royalty in that field.
Yep.
It was
Yes.
mind-boggling.
You got like the wish like anybody who's a UFO fan, and if you do the question of if you could have dinner with any three people in the world, who would you pick? You got to have that dinner.
You did. Enzo is in the chat, and he's our
Yeah.
resident UFO guy, and he said I would have loved to have met any of those gentlemen.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
they,
would.
I'd looked when I was there, looked at the program, talking about the different speakers and what their backgrounds were. And, I knew that they all had, great backgrounds, but I just didn't know, the popularity level they had in the UFO field.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was interesting. People later on coming up and, do you know who you were talking to? Are you even allowed to talk to him? And I'm like, I'll talk to any damn person I want to talk to, and they seem to like it. So
Yeah, right? Well, what
Yeah.
was so funny is we're at dinner and Pat just offhandedly starts talking about this situation, and Jess and I are like,
We're getting closer and closer. And he started name dropping like one at a time, and it took all of us to stay in our seats, just waiting for the next name. So
well,
that's amazing.
it is. That's an
sometimes
incredible experience.
sometimes you're just at the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
sometimes you can be like me and be so dumb you don't even realize who it is you're right there with.
And then you get to find out later what a terrific experience you didn't
Yeah.
know you had.
Of course,
Yeah.
being a musician and having done some studio work and some other serious music stuff in my life, I thought I had already met all the celebrities and people I'd wanted to, drank enough beers with enough pickers and stuff. But, the UFO thing, that really blew me away. And then last year I was or the year before last, I was at a bike ride event, and had lunch with a couple of people. And come to find out, one of the guys who was sitting over there by me was a former U.S. Figure skater. His name was Scott Hamilton, if you ever heard of him. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
That's pretty cool.
we got our picture together. Yeah, it's out there at Nashville, Tennessee, after a bike ride out there at what they call the Loveless Motel. Yeah, you
That
just
is
never know who
neat.
you're going to run into around there.
No joke. How cool is that?
That's
Huh.
very cool.
That is very, very cool. Well, we are
All right.
getting before
Yeah.
now while Jess is getting notebooks ready. Pat, can you let us know where, if somebody's interested in contacting you, where they could do that or where they could find your books and where you're speaking at if you have any engagements coming up?
Yeah, actually, this year is, if all of them hold up and come through, will probably be the busiest year I've ever had
Wow, that's great.
as far as speaking engagements. But okay, so my books can be bought at most all of the online retailers and at some brick and mortar retailers. Typically around Halloween time, even more brick and mortar retailers will sell my books. You can
Cool.
also, of course, get my books at my events, whether it be at a paranormal conference, delivering a presentation, or a more intimate setting like at a school or a big store or a library, doing the event there. I sign and personalize all my books and everything.
Yep.
So online, there is a Facebook page called Pat FitZHUGH. There is one for the Bell Witch the Full Account book. There's also one for the Ghostly Cries from Dixie book that not a lot of people know is out there, but it is out there. Um, there is my author site, which is patfitzhugh.com. It is kind of a website slash blog, and it is there where I have my event calendar of upcoming events.
Cool.
Except this year, in some cases, they've come so quickly, I haven't had time to even get in there. Like this interview now, and then the one I did last night, even though last night was pre recorded, I haven't even had time to put those in there yet. But I can still do that, just put a link back to yours. So,
Absolutely.
but yeah, it's on patfitzhugh.com, and I think the page is called Appearances. Plus, on the Facebook pages that I have, I will usually promote each event a few times there as well.
Awesome. Awesome.
And
Awesome.
there's a
And are
lot.
you going to be at
Nice.
Arkansas Expo again this year?
Absolutely.
Cool. Cool.
That's,
Cool.
that's probably the happiest I am in a paranormal sense is
That's
every
a
year.
great one.
Yeah. But every year being asked to come back.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I was talking to people before, people just don't know what that means to me, to
Yeah.
be able, to come back. That means obviously want what you have to offer. Uh, and it's also a great experience for me. I meet a whole lot of great people and
Mhm.
sometimes get uh, interviewed by a bunch of weirdos on the radio. I'm sorry, I was just picking on you. Um, but yeah, being asked back is always a great thing. And the Arkansas Paranormal Expo is one of the biggest in the country, if not the biggest. I'm not sure about some of the ones up northeast, but it's
Yeah.
definitely one of the biggest. And lots to do, lots of great people to meet, uh, memories to create, stories to tell later.
Yep.
So yeah, I'll be there. And I don't have my event calendar in front of me, but I've got a bunch of stuff coming up, paranormal conferences and other presentation events, a few private party type events, as well as a few more like library, bookstore, and special unique events
Nice.
coming up that we have not nailed down the exact dates for yet, but will be advertised.
Okay.
Yeah, this year his last year went really well, and this year is shaping up to be pretty well too.
That's awesome.
Well, we'll make sure as some of your things come up, we'll share them over on our page so
Yeah,
that the
absolutely.
listeners can see when you have lectures and other events coming up.
Yeah, that's awesome. If you could post that, that would be great, and I would so much appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
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 All right. Let's get a little bit of notebook game before we head out. I'll just say how it goes again because I know we have a few new people in the chat, and Pat here has never been privy to one of these games. So I'm a great lover of research, and everything goes down into these old notebooks, right? They're full of anything and everything and the weird thoughts that go through my head. So I have 5 notebooks. Uh, Everybody pick a notebook 1 through 5, pick a page number 1 through 75, and I will read whatever is on that page. And since Pat is new here and this is his first time on our show, I'm going to let him pick the first one.
Ooh, there we go. That'll work.
Okay, so how do I pick the first one? What do I do?
So you're going to pick a notebook 1 through 5,
Okay,
one of those, and then you're going to pick a page number 1 through 75.
let's go 545.
Okay.
5 and page number 45.
Okay.
Well, cool.
For some reason,
What's
5.
fun with her notebooks is she goes through and she doesn't have like a notebook for just UFO or anything like that. She just keeps one and
I just
chronologically
keep
does
going.
them. Yeah.
Yeah. So
And then
they're
out on the
all
front of it, she puts stuff. But yeah.
so you can see like all the different stuff. So this one is on the Phantom Bloom Flames that happened in Alva, Oklahoma, March 1922.
Oh, nice.
Mrs. Ona Smith, age 23, an invalid who lay paralyzed in bed, had to be accompanied by bedside watchers day and night who would put out mysterious blue flames which would appear out of nowhere and ignite various items in the room. Among the items that seemingly burst into flames was a brand new mattress, witnessed by several friends, family members, and a newspaper reporter. Bedding, clothing, draperies, and even a wall calendar were just a few of the items to be reduced to smoldering ruins. Witnesses described the mysterious blue flames giving off a crackling sound and seemingly jumping from the air. Now, down below in my own notes, I had excerpts from the book Mysterious Oklahoma by David A. Ferris, and also a March 14th, 1922 evening edition of the New York Times. This is one of those that made the papers. I did do my own research afterwards because I thought this might have been one of the stories that, the New York Times would throw up to get readers to pick it up. They'd throw a crazy story on the front page to pull up new readers. I did actually find her original obituary out of Alva, Oklahoma. Her middle name was Myers, or that would have been her
Mhm.
maiden name.
Mhm.
She did die in 1898, and she died the 20th of March, or she was born 1898, and she died the 20th of March, 1922. So it would have been 6 days after that article came out in the New York Times.
That she
And
passed.
she passed. She died in a house fire, if that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes. You can see her. She is buried in the Alva Municipal Cemetery in Alva, Oklahoma, plot number 04 L-03, if you want to go see her. So, Phantom
That's
Blue
pretty
Flames.
wild.
Yay!
Interesting.
All right, so now we've got Ginger, and
Yeah.
she wants
Notebook 4,
notebook.
page 21.
All right. Not hard there. Yay, and it's numbered. Okay.
That's
This
always
is, yeah, this is on, this is Victor Goddard, 1935. This is from when we were doing like the, um, like Philadelphia Experiment, Montauk Project, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Air Marshal Sir Robert Victor Goddard flew over a disused airstrip in Scotland and was suddenly in a strange sudden storm with yellow clouds. When he got below the cloud bank, the airstrip below was now active, with mechanics in blue overalls servicing yellow trainer planes. Just then, he ended back in the strange storm, but made it back safely. 4 years later, his experience seemed to come true. That airstrip was reactivated, air mechanic uniforms changed from brown to blue, and trainer planes were then started to be painted yellow.
So it's like a time slip thing.
He had like he had like a slip
Recall.
forward
Yeah,
and saw the airstrip 4 years in the future.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
I like that one.
that was cool.
Okay, next one is Julie with notebook 6, page 20. Wait, there's only 1 through 5 notebooks.
We'll do the fifth one.
Yeah.
So she doesn't have to read it.
That'll work.
Okay. All right, and number 20. Okay.
Page 20.
Okay. Hold on. What is this on? I have to go back a page and see what I'm talking about. I think this is the Superstition Mountains.
Oh, cool.
So this is the 1958 mystery. Now, just so you guys know, the Superstition Mountains, if you don't know, are a extraordinarily active place, high strangeness area. It's kind of like when we were doing Shasta, same kind of craziness. And it's most famous for the Lost Dutchman gold mine.
Yes.
That everybody's been after, the treasure. This is one of the weird things that happens there. So the 1958 mystery. In April of 1958, a deserted campsite was discovered on the northern outskirts of the mountain. The site seemed undisturbed. The person or persons had left behind everything, including their food, supplies, tents, and even personal letters. Most disturbingly found was blood-soaked blankets, although nothing else seemed amiss. No trace of the occupants were ever found. And strangely, the names and addresses on the found letters had all been torn away. So just one of the Superstition Mountains are quite well known for their incredible amount of missing people, and the missing people that they do eventually find usually have a bullet in their head.
Yeah.
So, because they went hunting where they shouldn't be.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good. We might have to do Superstition Mountains sometimes. There's a lot.
That would be
of
a good
stuff
one. That
with
would be
that
a good one.
Yeah. All right, who do we got now?
We've got Enzo, notebook 1, page 43.
Ooh, easy enough. Okay. Okay. This is on Oh, oddly enough, we were just talking about spook lights. This is on the East Prairie Spook Light in Missouri, East Prairie, Missouri. Um, just right off the BB Highway, there's a site where an old railroad track used to be. It is reported that a man fell asleep on the railroad track back in the 1930s. The man supposedly walking, trying to find his light, and got tired and fell asleep. After walking so far, as the story goes, a train came along before the guy could get up. The wheel of the railroad engine severed his head. This is weird that this popped up.
That is strange.
Yeah, the myth is that he walks the railroad with the light he finally found after being killed, continuing to look for his head. And there's a little short thingy after that. Someone had written, I myself have not witnessed this, but have heard many stories about it from different people, all telling me the same story, probably whoever I got the story from originally.
Karen said, how do you not know you're sleeping on a train track? That's a good point.
I guess if you're drunk enough.
Well, that's true. That is true. And then we have Ken with notebook 1, page 1.
Oh, easy enough.
Easy peasy.
Easy peasy.
Karen said, great show, guys. Thank you so much, Karen.
Hold on, maybe get my notebook shuffled back to the top again. Okay. Hold on. I had a note-a-lanch.
A notebook-a-lanch?
A notebook-a-lanch. Okay. I got it. All right, page 1. This is on Dublin, Wisconsin, which is a town that supposedly vanished in the 1990s. So, Dublin, Wisconsin, it's a small town. It was a small town in northwestern Wisconsin. Residents from the surrounding areas remember this town and even have genealogies that trace back to it. They have memories of visiting there and once having coffee mugs and t-shirts with the town's name. But there is now no historical record of a town by this name in Wisconsin anywhere. Interestingly, if you Google the town's name, it does show up as an option in the search bar, but there are no results. There are several local chat boards dedicated to remembrances of the town. Many people claim to have family who were there or visited, but all of the evidence of it has disappeared. There is now one photo left, taken inside a supposed Dublin bar. No one knows who the people in the picture are. There is also no known map with Dublin included, and research shoots down the, I have no idea what I wrote right there, that the town was renamed or that it was an unincorporated township. Another odd thing was if you Googled Dublin before the legend picked up steam, the search results would pull up an article on missing people in Wisconsin from a local Wisconsin newspaper. The Appleton Post. I gave myself a little side note. I went and looked it up. As of 2015, Wisconsin had over 1,000 open missing people cases. Some believe it's a clue to the Dublin mystery. This is a big one. There's a whole bunch of theories on why this town went missing off the face of the earth. Some of it had to do with military stuff, that it had popped up as a military kind of place and they were working with some hush-hush stuff that they weren't supposed to be, and they moved it out real fast, and I don't know. We'll have to go over this at some point. Pam and I had been talking about doing one just on disappearing places, like in the world, disappearing towns. And
Karen said, I found this Dublin, Wisconsin usually refers to New London, Wisconsin. That may be what you were talking. Maybe that was the name that you didn't know what you wrote.
Yeah, maybe. I was writing really fast. I do that when I start really running into some new information. I'm like, ee. But
Ken said maybe it was like a Mandela. Could be.
Yeah, it's very much like that. A lot of people, like I was talking about, like the t-shirts and the mugs from like the Chamber of Commerce that would have been there. A lot of people were like, oh yeah, I have a coffee mug from there. And then they would go to get it to show them. And it was suddenly not there anymore. Yeah. Or like the t-shirts. And so, yeah, it's an interesting one.
Okay, our
All
last
right.
one is Sylvain with book 3, page 33.
All right. I get my book
So,
shifted back around
Pat, we
again.
had people on tonight in the chat from Sylvain, France. Is that correct? If I remember correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got Karen is in Australia, and we've got Ian in the UK. All over the international tonight. Yay.
My great
Yeah.
international audience.
Yeah. This is on the legends of Oklahoma's Canadian River and Lake Eufaula. The hunting and heavily wooded area along the Canadian River just to the east of Lake Eufaula has been reported as a high strangeness area. Reports include common run ins with goblins and little people, fae activity, Bigfoot, Dogman, strange sounds of bells or wind chimes, and strange mists and ball lights. Legend states that there are underground Spanish ruins running for miles underneath the area, leading to Standing Rock, which is now covered by Lake Eufaula. And that absolutely makes sense because the Spanish conquistadors and the lost gold cities and stuff are heavy deep in the legends of Oklahoma.
Yep.
Under that Standing Rock, it's a historic landmark when the lake is at top level, which is 585 feet. The top of Standing Rock is approximately 25 feet below the surface. So Lake Eufaula was a dammed in kind of area. So this rock used to be quite accessible. It was out in the middle of just, the woods. And when they backfilled and created the dam and Eufaula was made, the rock got mostly covered, except for when we have times of drought. And actually, Standing Rock was quite visible. The top of it was. In the last 2 years, we had a horrible drought in the area, and it
Yep.
became visible again for just a little bit.
Yep.
Coronado and the Spanish explorers discovered the huge piece of sandstone in 1535, leaving behind symbols carved into the rock face. Buried treasure legend that goes along with this claims the Spanish buried large quantities of gold and silver somewhere in the vicinity of, somewhere in the vicinity. Many of the carved symbols point to the Spanish becoming ill and unable to carry their plunder with them. A carved arrow on a nearby tree and Indian history from that area seem to corroborate the story. Interestingly enough, and I don't have it here, it might be on the next page, the carvings on that sandstone rock, which are so immensely high, or would have been back in the day when you were just on ground level, those carvings are on top. And it's a sheer face up to it. So they are unsure how some of those Spanish conquistadors got their tushes up there to put those symbols on top. Pretty interesting.
It is. It's a fascinating place for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, yay.
All right.
Yay for notebook game.
Are we
Yeah,
good?
it ends up about time
Okay.
traveling conquistadors, and Ken said again. Yep, that's what I was laughing about too.
They're heavy in that area.
It's
All
a
right,
separate
so
reference.
do we have anything else? Are we good?
I think we're good if we want to go ahead and.
All right. Okay, so huge thank you to Pat Fitzhugh. Thank you so much for coming on with us and telling us all your fantastic stories.
Absolutely.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah, we loved having you. And if you are willing to, we'll see if we can't have you back on again sometime soon and hear some more of these fantastic Southern tales. It's good
Sure,
stuff.
anything. I'll try anything twice. Yeah, yeah, let's do it. Or 3 times. Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
Awesome. Like I said before, I'll be putting some links to his books up onto the Facebook page and any of his events and things that are coming up. We'll try to throw them over onto our page so our listeners can catch up with you at one of those. fantastic talks. Pam and I enjoyed the one that we went to in Kentucky so much. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, make sure to check out his books and check out all that he is doing. A big thank you to everybody who hung out in the chats and played the notebook game with us and kept us on our toes with some good questions. Remember to catch us every other week on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. I believe our next one is May 7th, and I think we're going to be talking about the Hat Man. So
Yes.
that one should be good.
Yep.
Yeah, and remember to send us in your stories and topic ideas. And like I said, I'll throw up the books and stuff that we talked about tonight up on the Facebook page for everybody to catch. So if we're good, keep it weird, keep it strange, and remember, it's all connected. Good night.
Good night, everybody. Hang around for a minute, Pat.